Mesada is an ancient fortification in the southern district of Israel situated on top of an isolated rock plateau on the eastern edge of the Judean Desert, overlooking the Dead Sea. Herod the Great built palaces for himself on the mountain and fortified Mesada between 37 and 31 BCE. According to Josephus, the Siege of Masada by troops of the Roman Empire towards the end of the First Jewish-Roman War ended in the mass suicide of the 960 Sicarii rebels and their families hiding there. Masada is located 20 kilometers east of Arad. Masada is one of Israel's most popular tourist attractions. Geography: the cliffs on the east edge of Masada are about 400 am high and the cliffs on the west are about 90 am high. The natural approaches to the cliff top are very difficult. The top of the plateau is flat and rhomboid-shaped, about 550 am by 270 am. There was a casemate wall around the top of the plateau totaling 1,300 am long and 4 am high, with many towers, and the fortress included storehouses, barracks, an armory, the palace, and cisterns that were refilled by rainwater. 3 narrow, winding paths led from below up to fortified gates. History: almost all historical information about Masada comes from the 1st century Jewish Roman historian Josephus. The site was first fortified by Alexander Jannaeus in the 1st century BCE. Herod the Great captured it in the power struggle that followed the death of his father Antipater. It survived the siege of the last Hasmonean king Antigonus II Mactavius, who ruled with Parthian support. In 66 CE, a group of Jewish rebels, the Sicarii, overcame the Roman garrison of Masada with the aid of a ruse. After the destruction of the Second Temple in 70 CE, additional members of the Sicarii fled Jerusalem and settled on the mountain top. According to Josephus, the Sicarii were an extremist Jewish splinter group antagonistic to a larger grouping of Jews referred to as the Zealots, who carried the main burden of the rebellion. Josephus said that the Sicarii raided nearby Jewish villages including En-Gedi, where they massacred 700 women and children. In 73 CE, the Roman governor of Ed Lucius Flavius Silva headed the Roman legion Exfratensis and laid siege to Masada. The Roman legion surrounded Masada, and built a circumvallation wall and then a siege ramp against the western face of the plateau. According to Dan Gill, geological investigations in the early 1990s confirmed earlier observations that the 375-foot-high assault ramp consisted mostly of a natural spur of bedrock. The ramp was complete in the spring of 73, after probably 2 to 3 months of siege, allowing the Romans to finally breach the wall of the fortress with a battering ram on April 16. Romans took the ex-legion and a number of auxiliary units and Jewish prisoners of war, totaling some 15,000 troops in order to crush Jewish resistance at Masada. A giant siege tower with a battering ram was constructed and moved laboriously up the completed ramp. Originally, Jewish rebels on top of Masada threw stones at those building and constructing the ramp. When this plan was realized, the Romans put captured Jewish prisoners from previously conquered towns to work the ramp. The Jewish people on top of Masada stopped killing those who built the ramp, choosing not to kill their fellow Jews, even though they understood this might result in the Romans penetrating the fortress. The walls of the fortress were breached in 73 CE. According to Josephus, when Roman troops entered the fortress, they discovered that its 960 inhabitants had set all the buildings but the food storerooms ablaze and committed mass suicide or killed each other. Josephus wrote of 2 stirring speeches that the Sicarii leader had made to convince his fellows to kill themselves. Only 2 women and 5 children were found alive. Josephus presumably based his narration upon the field commentaries of the Roman commanders that were accessible to him. There are significant discrepancies between archaeological findings and Josephus' writings. Josephus mentions only one of the 2 palaces that have been excavated, refers only to one fire, while many buildings show fire damage, and claims that 960 people were killed, while the remains of only 28 bodies have been found. The year of the Siege of Masada may have been 73 or 74 CE. Masada was last occupied during the Byzantine period of rule, when a small church was established at the site. Archaeology. The site of Mesada was identified in 1838 by Americans Edward Robinson and Eli Smith, and in 1842, American missionary Samuel W. Walcott and the English painter W. Tipping were the first moderns to climb it. It was extensively excavated between 1963 and 1965 by an expedition led by Israeli archaeologist Yigal Yadin. Due to the remoteness from human habitation and its arid environment, the site remained largely untouched by humans or nature for 2 millennia. The Roman attack ramp still stands on the western side and can be climbed on foot. Many of the ancient buildings have been restored from their remains, as have the wall paintings of Herod's 2 main palaces, and the Roman-style bathhouses that he built. The synagogue, storehouses, and houses of the Jewish rebels have also been identified and restored. The meter-high circumvallation wall that the Romans built around Mesada can be seen, together with 11 barracks for the Roman soldiers just outside this wall. Water cisterns 2/3 of the way up the cliff drain the nearby wadis by an elaborate system of channels, which explains how the rebels managed to conserve enough water for such a long time. Inside the synagogue, an ostracon bearing the inscription Reza Cohen was found, as were fragments of 2 scrolls. Parts of Deuteronomy 33:34 and parts of Ezekiel 35:38, found hidden in pits dug under the floor of a small room built inside the synagogue. In other loci fragments were found of the books of Genesis, Leviticus, Psalms, and Sirach, as well as of the songs of the Sabbath sacrifice. In the area in front of the northern palace, 11 small ostraka were recovered, each bearing a single name. One reads Ben Yair, and could be short for Eleazar ben Yai, the commander of the fortress. It has been suggested that the other 10 names are those of the men chosen by lot to kill the others and then themselves, as recounted by Josephus. The skeletal remains of 28 people were unearthed at Mesada. The remains of a male 20-22 years of age, a female 17-18 and a child approximately 12 years old were found in the palace. The remains of 2 men and a full head of hair with braids belonging to a woman were also found in the bathhouse. Forensic analysis showed the hair had been cut from the woman's head with a sharp instrument while she was still alive, while the braids indicated that she was married. Based on the evidence, anthropologist Josephus believes the remains may have been Romans whom the rebels captured when they seized the garrison. The sparse remains of another 24 people were found in a cave at the base of the cliff. Although the excavator Yigal Yadin was unsure of their ethnicity, the rabbinical establishment concluded that they were remains of the Jewish defenders, and in July 1969 they were reburied as Jews in a state ceremony. Carbon dating of textiles found with the remains in the cave indicate they are contemporaneous with the period of the revolt, and pig bones were also present. This indicates that the remains may belong to non-Jewish Roman soldiers or civilians who occupied the site before or after the siege. Zias also questioned whether there were so many as 24 individuals present, since only 4% of that number of bones was recovered. According to Shai Cohen, archaeology shows that Josephus' account is incomplete and inaccurate. Josephus only writes of 1 palace, archaeology reveals 2, his description of the northern palace contains several inaccuracies, and he gives exaggerated figures for the height of the walls and towers. Josephus' account is contradicted by the skeletons in the cave, and the numerous separate fires. According to Kenneth Atkinson, there is no archaeological evidence that Mesada's defenders committed mass suicide. The remnants of a Byzantine church dating from the 5th and 6th centuries have also been excavated on the top of Mesada. The Mesada story was the inspiration for the Mesada plan devised by the British during the Mandate era. The plan was to man defensive positions on Mount Carmel with palm fighters, in order to stop Erwin Rommel's expected drive through the region in 1942. The plan was abandoned following Rommel's defeat at El Alamein. The Chief of Staff of the Israel Defense Forces, Moshe Dayan, initiated the practice of holding the swearing-in ceremony of Israeli Armored Corps soldiers who had completed their tiranut, on top of Mesada. The ceremony ended with the declaration, "Mesada shall not fall again." The soldiers climbed the snake path at night and were sworn in with torches lighting the background. This ceremony is now held at Latron, outside Jerusalem. a 2,000-year-old seed discovered during archaeological excavations in the early 1960s was successfully germinated into a date plant. At the time it was the oldest known germination, remaining so until a new record was set in 2012. Modern tourism, Mesada was declared a UNESCO World Heritage Site in 2001. Visitors can hike up, or pay to take a cable car to the top of the mesa. There are two very steep hiking paths up the Snake Trail leaves from the eastern side at the Mesada Museum and gains approximately 300 meters in elevation. The Roman Ramp Trail is also very steep, but has less elevation gain, and is accessed from the western side of the mountain in the summer. While a dawn hike up the Snake Path on the eastern side of the mountain is considered part of the Mesada experience, a cable car operates at the site for those who wish to avoid the physical exertion. There is a visitors center and museum at the base of the cable car. Visitors are encouraged to bring drinking water for the hike up. However, water is available at the top. An audio-visual light show is presented nightly on the western side of the mountain. Mesada is an Israeli national park and there is a park entrance fee. In 2007, a new museum opened at the site, in which archaeological findings are displayed in a theatrical setting. Layout: an example of Herodian architecture, Mesada was the first site Herod the Great fortified after he gained control of his kingdom. The first of three building phases completed by Herod began in 35 BCE. During the first phase the Western Palace was built, along with three smaller palaces, a storeroom, and army barracks. 3 columbarium towers and a swimming pool at the south end of the site were also completed during this building phase. The original center of the Western Palace was square and was accessed through an open courtyard on the northwest corner of the building. The courtyard was the central room of the Western Palace and directed visitors into a portico, used as a reception area for visitors. Visitors were then led to a throne room. Off the throne room was a corridor that was used by the king, with a private dressing room. The dressing room also had another entranceway that connected to the courtyard through the mosaic room. The mosaic room contained steps that led to a second floor with separate bedrooms for the king and queen. The second building phase in 25 BCE included an addition of the Western Palace, a large storage complex for food, and the Northern Palace. The Northern Palace is one of Herod's more lavish palace fortresses and was built on the hilltop on the north side of Mesada and continues 2 levels down, over the end of the cliffs. The upper terrace of the Northern Palace included living quarters for the king and a semicircular portico to provide a view of the area. A stairway on the west side led down to the middle terrace that was a decorative circular reception hall. The lower terrace was also for receptions and banquets. It was enclosed on all 4 sides with porticos and included a Roman bathhouse. In 15 BCE during the third and final building phase the entire site of Mesada, except for the Northern Palace, was enclosed by a casemate wall. The casemate wall included a double wall with a space between that was used as living chambers for the soldiers and as extra storage space. The Western Palace was also extended for a third time to include more rooms for the servants and their duties. Gallery. See also: Archaeology of Israel, Gamla, Tourism in Israel, References. Bibliography: Avi Yonah, Michael A. L., Israel Exploration Journal 7, 1957, 1:160, Yadin, Yigael. Mesada, Herod unregistered trademark S Fortress in the Zealot's Last Stand. London, 1966. Yadin, Yigael. Israel Exploration Journal 15, 1965. Netzer, Ehud. The Palaces of the Hasmoneans and Herod the Great. Jerusalem, Yad Ben-Zvi Press and the Israel Exploration Society, 2001. Netzer, E., Mesada. The Yigael Yadin Excavations 1963–1965. Vol 3. IES Jerusalem, 1991. Ben Yehuda, Nachman. The Mesada Myth, Collective Memory and Myth-Making in Israel, University of Wisconsin Press. Ben Yehuda, Nachman. Sacrificing Truth, Archaeology and the Myth of Mesada, Humanity Books, 2002. Bar Nathan, R., Mesada. The Yigal Yadin Excavations 1963–1965, Vol 7. IES Jerusalem, 2006. Jacobson, David, The Northern Palace at Metzadá Herod's Ship of the Desert? Palestine Exploration Quarterly, 138, 2, 99–117. Roller, Dwayne W. The Building Program of Herod the Great / Berkeley and Los Angeles, University of California Press, 1998. External links, photographs and footage of the Yadin excavations, Sacrificing Truth, Archaeology and the Myth of Metzadá, World Heritage Sites page, Stiebel, Guy D. Metzadá. Encyclopaedia Judaica. Ed. Michael Barenbaum and Fred Skolnick 2nd ed. Volume 13. Detroit, Macmillan Reference USA, 2007. 593–599. Gale Virtual Reference Library. Metzadá Photos, Metzadá page on Israeli National Park website.